Thank you for joining us on the Beyond Sunday podcast by the Springs Church. Today we have a conversation with Pastor John and Chris Leach, the pastors of Jubilee Fellowship in Denver, Colorado. Our host today is Pastor Owen O'Sullivan, the executive pastor at the Springs Church in Jacksonville, Florida. This podcast is available to watch on YouTube and Facebook. You can listen along on Apple, Android, or Spotify. If you enjoy this podcast, please be sure to share it with your family and friends. Our next episode will be with our very own pastors, Pastor John and Krista Bailey.
Welcome to Beyond Sunday, episode 2. I just want to say thank you to everyone who has shared out and given us positive reviews on episode 1. And today I'm just delighted to have Pastor John and Pastor Chris Leach here with us. They have been with us for the Marriage Fundamentals Conference, and they've done an excellent job. And I would just say to you, if you're out there and you'd like to see some of that content, visit our website, visit our Facebook page. And that would be fabulous to go back and see a lot of what they were talking about throughout this weekend. So I have them with me, and we're just going to be conversing today about all things relationship, and we'll just see where the conversation leads us throughout the day. So, Pastor John, I want to start with you with a very serious question and just kind of ask you, if you were to pick your top number one golfer, would it be Rory McIlroy or Justin Thomas? One of those two guys, and depending on your answer will depend on the rest of the questions for this podcast.
I think obviously it has to be Rory McIlroy.
Thank you.
It? Yes.
Now, did you get a chance to play the TPC while you guys are here? I know you're from Colorado,
right? And
you're visiting Jacksonville for the conference. Did you get a chance to get out and play?
I did. Having a couple of days before the conference started and the weekend, and we planned it that way so that we'd have a chance to play. We have some friends here who are storytellers there at the golf course and are able to make arrangements for us to be able to play. So here we are, in space and time with the fifth major, they call it, getting ready to play the players, and we got to play it, and that's 17th Island Green. Jacksonville has some of the best golf courses in the world, not just the United States, but in the world for sure.
Did you get it on the green on the 17th? That's what everyone wants to know.
Thank you for asking. So that the last three are called the Gauntlet, 16, 17, and 18. For those that are not golfers, you won't understand. But for any golfers that are listening right now, it's that par 5, that par 3 that's an island, and then 18 is that real tough one. And I parred the Gauntlet, the last 3. So, woohoo!
Fantastic. You can say that you've done what Rory McIlroy did when he won it, right?
I am very similar to Rory McIlroy.
I'm sure.
Hey, Rory.
And Chris, you give him the time and the opportunity to get out there and play some golf,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. Something he thoroughly enjoys. It's good for him. It's good for him to get out in the fresh air, and he loves it, and it's good.
And I know this is kind of just going right into the topic today, but is there room for hobbies, and is there room for getting some time as individuals in relationships and marriages, especially kind of where you're at now in life? What would you say to that?
Well, I think that you got to realize that people are different, and what I'm interested in might be not something he's interested in. So he loves golf, so I take an interest in golf, although I don't play golf, but I watch golf with him. I love hearing his stories about the golf courses he plays and who he plays and the conversations and the people he gets to meet. And he takes interest in, I love decorating, I love our little grandkids. They're just so much. So he takes an interest in that.
Wow,
which means I buy stuff for her to do.
Willingly.
Yes, willingly.
No,
that is
great.
the truth, though. It's allowing, I think, for both of us to do the thing
To
that
be
we like,
individuals, yeah.
and then finding interest in it for each other, so that it's together. Yeah.
Well, and I think hobbies are good for our soul. I think it's good sometimes to get away from our daily life and everything we do, and we're passionate. I'm passionate about those kind of things, and he's passionate about golf and motorcycles and stuff, and it's good. It makes us healthier individuals.
That's good.
Absolutely, yeah. No, definitely. I love that because life can get busy and
Yes,
there's so much going on.
very.
So just to have that little bit of looking in the rear view mirror to help is fantastic. So that's great. You guys have a healthy marriage, healthy family. And I'd like maybe Chris just tell us a little bit about your family and where you guys are at today.
So we have 5 children. Our oldest is Amy, and she's married and has 6 kids.
Wow.
Yes, that's what and 5 of them are girls. scary. Our next child is Brent, and he is our special needs son, and he lives with us and probably will his entire life, and our entire life. And our life is very interesting. What you see here is kind of fun, but our life at home, with him, he's very high functioning. He's a lot of fun, but it's
He needs us.
He needs us.
He needs us.
Yeah. And he thinks we need him.
Yeah.
And his name is
Brent.
Brent. Wow.
Yeah. Yep. And then we have our daughter Katie, and she's married to JJ, and they have 3 kids, 2 boys and a little girl. And then we have twin boys, and it's David, and he works in the finance investment. And then Daniel is married to Holly, and they have 3 children. And Amy's married to Ryan. So just to make sure I give him a quick little shout out.
Yeah, with that, 3 of our children are in ministry with us.
Amazing.
And enjoy that. Not something we ever set out.
Yeah.
It was just something that God did for us. So our effort is it's a family effort with our church. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's such a joy and such a blessing to be able to have that and have your kids involved in ministry with you. If it's okay, would you mind me asking just with Brent and having a child with special needs? I know, lots of families in ministry with a child with special needs. How is that for you guys, and what kind of encouragement could you give to some families out there too that maybe are setting off on that journey, that you could encourage them in?
I think that I would say don't get ahead of yourself. Their challenges each day can be overwhelming. And if you get ahead of yourself with the challenges and all the things that need to happen and be done, and the financial portion that takes it out of a family, I think is huge. But I would just say try to live in that moment, because that's the moment that counts. One of my favorite scriptures is God's mercies are new every day. And I know if I can go to sleep at night, I can have a different perspective in the morning with him. And there's some days he's super easy and just a blast. But then there's other days that
he's going through tough things.
Yes. Yeah. And he struggles with being alone and lonely and having a lot of friends, and we're his best friends. And, years ago when we didn't start out saying, hey, let's have 5 kids for sure. Let's have twins. It's something God decided, and we were thrilled and are thrilled now. But one of the things the Lord showed me about having a big family is because for him, like us being out of town, they all pitch in and they all help, and in fact, our oldest granddaughter, who's almost 15, hangs out with them and stays with them just to keep them company. And it's just a journey. It's a journey, and live it day by day.
Wow.
Yeah. Can I just brought that up? I think it's an underserved population.
Wow.
Right? I think not only inside the church, but I think also just in community. A lot of times it's a rare thing in an overall population, and so there's just not a lot of funds for it. There's not a lot of what you do for it. When they're little, more so. When they become adults, it's a completely different ball game. So I would say that it's one of the things that we love all of our children, but our son Brent is also a ministry with Chris and I. We see it as God gave him to us, and there's a ministry that we have with our son. And I would encourage any person who has special needs children or a special needs situation in their life, having the Lord's grace and mercy, like Chris said, but seeing it as God chose you for a special mission in that. And that's the way that we see that. It's not always easy, for sure, but it's something that we feel called to, and we enjoy, and we sure love our son. So
I absolutely love it. And thanks so much for sharing about that. Pastor John, if I could ask you just on that note, for the church, what should the church and how could the church do better when it comes to serving that community?
Dude, that's such a good question. What I can tell you what we've done.
Yeah.
We have started a support group for parents of special needs children. We just think it's such a lonely, overwhelming, never-ending emotional place that you're in, emotional and physical, spiritual. And so starting a support group for other parents, just to have some place to go, to even as we're talking to you about it, we can feel the compassion in your questions and can sense a heart that is open to even ask these questions. Most people never even think to ask about it, right? But you can't imagine what it's like unless you have it. And so having other people who can just come and talk about the struggle with it, the burden with it at times, the joy that's with it too, the needs that are there. I think that's such a huge thing, just offering help. And when the Bible says to bear one another's burdens, I think it's as simple as just offering an opportunity for someone to talk about what it's like, and to just, there's nothing that's going to change it, right? The side of heaven, nothing is going to change it. So how do we help each other bear up underneath that? And that, I think, if the church would just be open to talking about it and make a way in your children's church for special needs, make a way in your youth for special needs. It's not a huge population, but it's one of the most isolated populations that there could possibly be. And I would encourage, it's there for every pastor who might be listening. It's there in your church a lot more than you would have any idea. And if you'll open a door, you'll be surprised at what can happen. So, yeah.
Can I just say something real quick to that? I just think that parents that I meet, that, our son is pretty high functioning, so that's pretty awesome. It does help. But I have friends that have nonverbal, special need, adult children, and I just remind them, hey, your treasures are stored in heaven. People don't see.
Wow, that's so good.
But God sees.
God sees.
Amen. Guys, thank you so much for sharing on that. I know I didn't set out in that direction, but I feel like that's such a need and a treasure, and that advice goes deep into the heart of the church. So we're listening, just to say that. Let me ask you this, Chris, how long are you guys married?
We've been married over 37 years.
Wow.
Yep.
And who pursued who? How did it start? What was
Well, John's my only boyfriend. He's still my boyfriend. And I was 16 and he was 17. And I was a church girl, raised in church all my life. And he walked into the Sunday school room, and he had long hair, and he was the most coolest, most attractive thing I'd ever seen in my life. And so I don't know who pursued who, but I think he pursued me first, but then I was the pursuer, kind of, and then it kind of went back and forth a little bit. But I remember he loved the band Rush. Hey, Chris, have you ever heard of Rush? I'm like, oh yeah, I've heard of Rush. No, I hadn't, but I wanted to be cool. I wanted him to think I was cool. But he's like, let me let you listen to this cassette tape of Rush.
Cassette, that puts an age on us right there.
Yeah, it was. So I think it was pretty mutual, don't you think?
Yes.
The pursuing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
We're all going to be looking at Rush tonight to see what that is.
Geddy Lee, I know about him now.
That's amazing. How old were you guys when you got married then? Because it sounds like it was young when you guys met. So.
Yeah, Chris was 19. We were both 19, but I turned 20 just a couple of days
after
we got married. So we were kids.
We grew up together.
We did. We grew up together.
Yep.
And of course, all the stories that you hear about odds are stacked against you when you're younger, we believe those are true, but we don't believe that they're insurmountable odds.
Yep.
And there are a lot of benefits to having a person in your life over a great length of time.
Wow.
And the treasure that we have with each other and the richness of the relationship, someone else couldn't get it in 5. There's no substitute for time, ultimately. Now, you don't want to do time like it's prison, but if it's time that has been developed and it's cared for and it's invested in, then the reward of longevity it's incredible. Mm-hmm. It's just incredible. Yeah.
Well, and I think, like I mentioned, we grew up together. We really did grow up together. We became adults together and parents together, obviously. But I think because, we weren't on separate paths coming together, right? We were so young that we became the same path together. So we knew how to stay on that same path, and we knew how to grow up together and mature. And I think that helped us. To say the least.
Yeah, of course. It's not to say that someone who does it different has any less of a relationship. No. And there's a lot to be said for being mature as you enter into marriage. But we can also say that there is another side, that when you grow up together and you have that investment, we have the same stories. Right? We're not trying to bring in stories from different decades and different events.
So interesting.
We relate to each other all the way through our lives. and it's just given such a symmetry
Yep.
and a beautiful tapestry that has been developed over a long period of time. So we're pro relationship.
Wow.
That's where
Yeah.
we're at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love hearing Pastor John, our senior pastor, who's obviously dear friends with you guys.
Yes.
He talks about you guys being the first healthy marriage he ever seen. So that's amazing. But it was young. So if you could go back and maybe even give yourself advice, that 19-year-old, young adult getting married, that would help you for the first 10 years of marriage, and maybe you're speaking to the young couple that's out there that's getting ready. What advice would you give to that young couple that's setting out that you would give yourself now today if you could?
Well, we have 3 kids that are married, so
Yes.
it's interesting kind of walking them through those early years of marriage. But personally, for me, I think I would tell myself to not make a big deal out of everything. that keep the main thing the main thing.
Yeah.
If there's a problem, deal with the problem, but don't nag. Just you could. I know I made a big deal. I nagged. Out of stupid stuff. I wasted valuable time nagging him to be somebody that God didn't make him to be.
Wow.
So keep the main thing the main thing, I think, is what I would tell myself
That'll
many years
preach.
ago.
Yeah,
That
I
would
think
preach.
that's good. I guess I would say, if I were talking to my 19-year-old self, I definitely would tell myself, I think Chris is right, very few things are actually fatal. When you're younger, everything seems to be life
Yep.
and death. We've got to do it this way, and it's got to be this.
Hmm.
And I think the older that you are, the more you realize very few things are really worth going to the mat over, right?
Mhm.
Very few hills worth dying on. There are some,
Yeah.
but most of them are not. And I definitely would tell myself, I'm a believer that your relationship with Christ determines
Everything.
every other relationship that you have.
Mm-hmm.
I would have, at an earlier age, made that the priority in my marriage rather than working on this issue or working
Mhm.
on that issue or
Yep.
trying to make enough money or whatever it was. I believe if you get this relationship this way,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
right, everything this way works out. And so many times we're trying to work it out horizontally, right, and thinking that the vertical first and horizontal will work out exactly like it's supposed to be.
Mm.
Yeah.
Fantastic. For both of you guys, I don't know, maybe if you could speak a little bit about your upbringing and maybe, it's two becoming one. And sometimes when that two becoming one, it's not just right there at that moment in time. It's also every event that's led up to the place where they say, I do on the altar. Maybe you could talk about your guys' individual pasts and how that impacted the marriage and how we need to be careful that we don't allow maybe things in our past to define or direct our marriage
Good.
as we kind of walk through that.
Yeah.
So my parents are 84, and they've been married 60, it'll be 68 years the end of this month. And I was the youngest of 5, so I was kind of like an only child. But my parents got saved at a pretty young age. They were about 27. And so I knew nothing but church my entire life. I was born and raised and lived. I can't even tell you the date I got saved because I
Wow.
just don't ever remember not being saved.
Wow. Amazing.
And I think my parents, by the time I was born and around, that they would worked out a lot of their issues and stuff kind of prior to that. So I only saw them as having like a perfect marriage. Now that I'm grown up and have my own marriage, I look at back and conflict. They didn't deal with conflict, so I didn't know how to deal with conflict in a marriage, and marriage has conflicts. So I'd ignore a lot of that, and that's not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to kind of confront it and deal with the things we need to deal with. So that was my expectation, that everything would be perfect, and I would have the marriage of my parents, how many years they had been married when I got married. I thought it would be that way. And obviously we had to work through being married for 25 years for when we got married.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
I would say, the story is opposite. My father abandoned our family when I was 3. My mom married again to an incredible individual. His name was John Leach. He adopted my brother and
Wow.
I a wonderful man who changed our lives in such a wonderful way. But he was killed in a car accident when I was 11, so 2 traumatic losses. And then there was a third man that came into the picture who was an abusive person. The stories that you can imagine that go with alcohol, that's abused, and just a violent tendency. So so picture those 2 people and the product of those 2 families coming together to have our marriage. Statistically, we shouldn't have made it. So I would say this, and I think what you said is true. With God, what's impossible with man is always possible with God.
Wow.
And what we haven't been given by pedigree, we can get through the Holy Spirit. Yeah. He can make things happen that are absolutely so we're not the statistic. We're the opposite of it. We have a stable 37-year marriage. Our children have grown up knowing nothing but that stability, and we certainly bringing those two lives together. The pastor that did our wedding had a great picture. He said it's like 2 rivers that converge together, and where they converge, it's very tumultuous. It's white water and it's rapids, but a little further along, it all calms down, and it becomes bigger than what it was when they met together. Yeah. Marriage can be like that. It can be tumultuous, learning how to live together and how to love each other and how to prefer the other one. But if you'll invest and make it happen, the end product is that you're far bigger together than you would be by yourself without it. And it's so worth it. Wow. So worth it. Yeah.
I love it. I love that answer completely. And, sometimes people say, I've heard it being said, at least a rookie should not be the expert when it comes to marriage. And I love because, there is time, especially early on in marriage, it's the 2 worlds colliding. I love that picture of that river colliding. So what would you say for the couple now that's moving forward, and like what is the hope there in terms of getting to that place where the streams are settling and stuff like that? How would you speak to that? How should we prepare ourselves for the different seasons and the different moments that come along as you grow in age, as you grow in maturity? What are some things that couples should be navigating through as they walk to that place? And does it get better? Does marriage get better?
Can I take this one? So you use the word seasons, and I would say that's exactly what it is. Marriage has seasons. Mm-hmm. It's not always winter, and it's not always summer, but there are spring and winter and fall and summer. I think some of it does go with age. Sometimes we equate a person's age to they're in the spring of their life, they're in the fall of their life. I think that when you're married at different ages, you have some of those things. I think marriage is cyclical. It has its ups and it has its downs. Is it worth it? It's 100% worth it.
Wow.
It's not just a fight. It's not just a struggle. It's not just someday. If you'll make the investment, it's the greatest thing. Other than Jesus, it's the greatest thing that has ever happened to me. And I actually equate it with Jesus, because he who finds a wife or a husband finds a good thing and obtains God's favor, right? God's favor is in this relationship to me. And marriage to me, what is it about, and what is it supposed to be doing? I think it's the greatest picture that we have on earth of how God loves us and how we're supposed to love God. Ephesians 5, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. Yep. Wives, submit yourself to your husbands as you do to the Lord. The picture is how we do it with Jesus to get it right between us. So is it worth it? It's 100% worth it. What would I say to any couple that's new or that is wanting to invest? Learn to love Jesus and make your spiritual life your priority is foundational to making your marriage a priority and work. And I know perhaps someone who doesn't know Christ hears that and thinks, I'm giving everything I have to it. It's not an insult that I'm trying to say to anybody. What I'm trying to say is you can't give what you don't have.
Right.
So when we talk about unconditional love is not love that says, I love you if, I love you when, I love you will you. Unconditional is no matter what you do, I'm going to love you. It's not natural, it's supernatural love. And the only way I can give that kind of love is if I experience that kind of love. Everything is in a relationship with Jesus. And I know you're a pastor, of course you're going to say those things. I'm a human before I'm anything else. I'm a man who has, you heard just a little bit. I mean, if you use your imagination at any length, you can understand what we what we brought into marriage with each other and what we had to overcome.
Yeah.
But oh my goodness, what you didn't get by pedigree, you can get through the Holy Spirit. And I'm the living product of that, man. God is so faithful. He is so faithful.
And I think honestly, I think it could have been easier for him to follow along what he saw growing up. But because he had to overcome those things, it was so like even better because, Christ says we are overcomers. Mm-hmm. And, there were some crucial times he had to make those choices. I'm not going to be that guy. I'm going to be who God created me to be. I'm going to be your husband. I'm going to be it forever. And I'll never leave you and I'll never forsake you till death do us part. And we took those pretty serious. But I think the one thing I would say is that, like, if you're stuck in a rut, when we had our twins, it's crazy, but they were up all the time. And one would start the very night one would start sleeping through the night. That night, the other twin decided to be awake. And so it was a long season of just being up all the time at night, hours off and on. That life's kind of like that nothing stays the same.
Wow.
When you're in that position and we're up all night and I'm up with babies, you think you're going to be in that position forever and you're not. It changes. Life changes. So if you can weather through those storms, get to the sunshine, just know that nothing stays the same forever, and just be willing to go through those changes and be committed.
That is so true. Outside of marriage, they say that suicide is it's a decision to react to something in a permanent way of something that is so temporary, right? And I think sometimes we make decisions in marriage thinking, oh, this is permanent, so I'm going to make this decision that will never change. I'm going to get away from this person, or this person will never change. It's the wrong way to look at anything in life. You're in a season, and season is a part of life. Make it through that season because there are good days. Our best days are in front of us, not behind us. And again, that comes back to Jesus, doesn't it? I can say that with confidence because I know Jesus.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I know my wife Sarah and myself will be shouting hallelujah at this because we're in that season where we've got the kiddos and they're waking up on opposite nights of the week, and we're like, will we get a full night's sleep? So thank you. And I hope that every couple is listening into that it's always worth it. It's always worth it. That is really powerful. I want to shift gears just for a few moments, and I want to talk to you guys as pastors for a moment, and especially this year with COVID has impacted the world, and people, will be listening from different parts where lockdown measures have been different, more severe in certain places. And, I wanted maybe you guys to speak to single people for a moment who they're out there and they're waiting on their Boaz, or they're waiting on their Rachel, and they're like, God, will you ever, hurry up right here? I've been fasting and praying. What would you say to a couple in that season where it seems like everything is just suddenly shut down, and all of a sudden maybe it's not even possible to get out and connect like they used to connect, and that could be COVID or not COVID? There can be those seasons for single people. Have you guys got any advice, maybe just to start off with, for that single person that's out there?
Well, we have a son. He's the one that's in the investment, one of our twins, and he played football in college and just had tons of people around him his entire life, very successful. He lives across town from all of us. So I think, working from home, everything has shifted. As pastors, we still had to get out. We still had to do recordings for service. We were still meeting with people. But those people who had to work from home, and especially who lived alone, I think that, honestly, I think this pandemic's been difficult for everybody, but when you're alone, I think it magnified everything.
Wow. Yeah.
I think people, young people especially, have so much more time to think about, my life's going nowhere, and that's not the truth. I think you need to enjoy where you're at, because everyone has this fairy tale idea that marriage, if I could just find that right person and my life will drastically change, and it's a false. It does drastically change, and it is for the good, but I would just say enjoy the time because it's your time.
Wow.
When you get married, it's not your time, and everything changes. It's not about you, it's about us, and it's about the other person. And you're not allowed to be selfish
Wow.
if you want a successful
That's
marriage.
right. Yeah.
So I think for people who aren't alone, who have people that they live with, I think we have to be very conscious about reaching out to people like our son. Our whole family is, hey Dave, we want you to come over for dinner. We want you to come. A couple of our kids have went to his house for dinner, just to be on purpose about reaching out, just to make sure that older people, I think some of the worst things is during this pandemic is people dying alone. God never intended that, They have to look through a glass window or a door.
Yeah.
That's not how it's supposed to be. So I think we have to go beyond what's comfortable to us and reach out to the world at large, and one person at a time to do that, I think.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, you said it. It's not good for us to be alone. Those are here. God creates the entire situation. And then His word, it's not good for man to be alone, and created a partner, right? We need that. We are not good by ourselves. A form, maybe the highest form of punishment in our penal system, is to put someone in solitary confinement. It messes with your mind. It messes with your spirit. That alone, lonely, uninterrupted, just by yourself, it's not good. It's not good for us. And I would agree that this pandemic has exposed that.
Yep.
And I wouldn't have wanted to be in the situation of having to make the decisions about what do you close down and how long do you close it down for. Because we know as pastors, like you would know, there's another side. Yes, we're trying to protect people physically, but we're opening up, there's going to be emotional baggage that we'll be dealing with for years to come from what's happened during this pandemic. And it's not a judgment call on what was right and what was wrong. It's just simply to say that loneliness and that alone, it's a dangerous place to be. The enemy loves to catch a person when they're in that place and vulnerable, because you will say yes to things that you would normally not say yes to. You're in a bad place when you're in there. So I would encourage people, find that way, whether it's Zoom, even Zoom. It's not perfect, and it's not the ideal of being face-to-face, touching someone, reaching out. But it's more than just being by yourself day after day after day. And I totally get in a small group if you can. You've got to find community. We were made for community, and it's crucial.
Yeah. Well, and Pastor John, just to follow up with you on that, because that speaks so true for single people. And I loved what you said, Chris, about just finding joy in where you're at. Somebody once said, with Adam, he went to sleep and God created a partner for him. Sometimes you just got to go to sleep and let God do the work on that.
That's it.
But it's not just singles that are being affected during this time of pandemic. Also, I think at the beginning of it, there was a novelty in getting on Zoom. There was a novelty on sitting at home and watching the service online. But I think at this point in this stage in it, there is a place where people can get screen fatigue, or I for me personally, as we're coming up on our 7-year anniversary, is the place where we need community as a couple as well. We need fellowship, we need friendship. How can people start to make steps to connect, to stay in community, to have that iron sharpen iron effect within the church during this pandemic, do you think?
I just want to say, you say it, because I know what you're going to say.
So I would just say that the Scripture tells us not to give up the habit of meeting together. It is very easily to fall in the habit of not being together. So like you said, all of a sudden it's easier to watch something on a screen than it is. Relationships are messy and they take time, but the outcome of it is huge. So I would encourage your listeners who if you can be in church, man. Now, I am speaking, I'm biased, I'm a pastor, but that community can happen in that place. You can make connections. If that's not an alternative for you, or you're not there, you need to find ways to have the connection. You need to be in relationship. with other people.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, I know Springs Church has Bible studies and places for community. I think you just got to take that step and just do it. Just don't, God's going to protect you. I think what we've seen at our church is, what's kind of surprised me as a younger generation, they're so afraid of getting this disease. And I'm just saying, just get out of your comfort zone. God's going to protect you. And I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying that
To intentionally expose yourself.
Yes,
That's not what
I'm not
Chris is
saying that.
Right.
I'm just saying, make a choice, go to church, because it will. What's funny is churches are growing. What? We've had more new people come to our church. People who would never come to church, never have come through the doors of our church looking for something, and that's why it's so important. That's why it was so important for us, in talking with your pastor, John, to open the doors. Open the doors. People need Jesus. People need community. I remember it was like the second weekend we opened our church doors, which was like last May or June. These little kids, they didn't know who I was. They were so starving for affection and conversation that they ran up. They didn't know who I was. They ran up to me and they hugged me and they're like, "Oh, we're so glad to see people."
Wow.
I was like, wow. And I walked away just like crying, like, oh my goodness, it's not just about this pandemic. People are starving. People are made to touch, and people are made to have community and have conversation. And I think that is one terrible thing that this pandemic has, amongst other things, but has brought.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. And I like what you said about like not falling out of the habit of it either. Like, and I think that is a big thing, is wherever people are at, because I know even where I come from in Ireland, the lockdowns are on a different level maybe than they are here in Florida. So for every group, it's kind of like different at this moment in time, but it should be in our mindset to say, yes, God designed us for community.
Yes.
God designed us to live together. God designed us to grow together. So I think that's a wonderful part. One more kind of pastoral one for you guys is, again, you've been pastoring a long time and you're 37 years married. What is something that you would say that has changed in how the enemy attacks marriages, that you would say that we need to be cautious of, and we, as maybe this generation is kind of exposed to, that we need to be careful of right now?
I would say screen time. I think what is on our computers or our TV or our phones, iPads, there's so much, whether that be pornography or whether that be
Facebook or
whatever. I mean, Facebook, I have friends that are like, man, we're on Facebook like hours and hours of the day. And I'm thinking, how do you have time for that? I think that even living in the same home, I think you just need to be careful that you're not living in separate places of the house, that you make it a priority to have dinner together, even if you're picking that up. Or one thing that we've done early on, we did dinner, we cooked it together. And we just, and we usually hadn't done that. And that's kind of been a lot of fun.
Who's the better cook?
Oh, me by far. He's the better griller, though. He can grill. Yeah. He can grill 9 times.
So what do you cook, Chris?
I cook. Wow, I wasn't
Cajun
thinking of
food.
that.
Cajun food.
Because he's from Louisiana,
I'm
so
from
I
Louisiana,
wanted
so
to learn to cook that.
yeah.
So jambalaya, red beans and rice, etouffee, green chili. We're from Colorado. And love
getting
the
hungry.
green
You can
chili.
make green chili like
Spaghetti.
nobody.
That good old comfort food.
Yes.
Homemade chicken pot pie. That's really good.
Yeah, I definitely, and we even experience in our own marriage that we have to make sure that there is spaces where there is no screen time taking place, and that there is an awareness of when we can be on screen, if there's screen time, that we acknowledge that, so we're not like trying to be in conflict with each other. So I think that is a huge one that we are battling in this generation of is the grabbing of the attention of the screens. They're everywhere. I mean, iPads, like you said, iPhones, everything. Anything else?
I would add, I think the big changes are that culture has shifted far more toward individual on a screen than face-to-face, right? It's substituted face-to-face relationships over and over. And I think that we all would admit that, screen time you probably get that little report weekly that tells you what was your screen time this last week. And I always notice when if I've been by myself more, my screen time's going up. It's just so easy to be isolated suddenly. But that's been a big shift. Far more individual screens than face-to-face. I would say the pressure that marriages are under today is just absolutely tremendous. That you've probably heard that quote that the divorce rate in the church is equal to the divorce rate outside. I disagree with that. I don't think that that's true. I think the divorce rate in the church for people who are in a nominal relationship with Christ, it might be like the outside. But my experience has been the opposite. The people that are in a very passionate relationship with Jesus, obviously not every single one, but they're in a passionate relationship with Jesus, it does offer some working understanding of how to get through difficult times in marriage or with children or in business. It does. And I know I'm beating that drum a lot, but I'm just simply a believer that relationship with Christ is preeminent for everything else. It's our understanding of how everything else in the world should be and how we get along and how we walk in humility and how we forgive people and how we trust again. And I think I do think marriages are under a tremendous amount of pressure. It's not a marriage-friendly culture that we have today. And yet, at the same time, we can tell you that marriages can also thrive right now and can do well right now. And maybe the light shines even brighter because of the time in the world that we live. Having a strong marriage right now might be one of the greatest witnesses of the power of Christ that we have. So, would say that.
I just would say, even pre-pandemic, I think screen time, like if you have kids, I think, I've often thought of like, how would we have done it? I mean, cell phones and stuff were just becoming popular when our sons were like in high school. I think I would, first of all, really monitor it. I think I would let them know that I'm paying for their phone and at any time I can pick it up and I can take it away. And it's a privilege. It's not just a given.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then I think like we look at our little grandkids and they know more about phones and iPads than we know. Yeah, I
they
mean,
can operate
go
iPads
do that,
like
Nana.
that.
You don't know what you're doing. I'm like, okay. I just think there are always, no matter what time you live in, what age, there's always a distraction that the enemy puts in our lives to distract us from our goal and what the Lord has for us. And I think screen time on whatever that looks like, a TV or whatever, we need to just monitor that. I think if you have kids, I don't think the thing is like take it completely away, because then they won't know how to deal with it when they are given it, because they'll want it when they turn 18. But you teach them how to deal with their screen time and what to do with it and stuff. So yeah, I
think so.
Well, thank you guys for sharing that, and I definitely I just agree that's so important in what we're facing in our culture today. But ultimately, like that loving relationship with Jesus, that it can thrive, it can grow, can continue to develop. But I really appreciate you guys being here today. This has been a fantastic conversation. I know there's moms and dads and there's husbands and wives that are shouting at this and saying incredible, like great content, and it has been rich for us today. And I would just encourage everyone who's listening in today to go back, listen over some of the conference that we've done here at Marriage Fundamentals. And we're excited about the next podcast that's coming up as well. We'll have Pastor John and Krista actually on the next podcast, who I know you guys are deep friends with. And we're going to be going through their life story, and we're going to be hearing all about what God has done in the different stages of their life. And I think that's going to be really incredible. But I want to give the last word to you guys. Maybe I could just put this out there. What was God's purpose in marriage? And then I'm going to give you guys that question, and you can say whatever you want just to wrap up this conversation. And if you have anything that you want to share to the people out there, please, whoever wants to go first, and you guys can wrap that up.
So I would think God's purpose in marriage ultimately, we're all those who know Christ. We're all supposed to be becoming more like Jesus. I think that marriage is a great perfectioner. Can I make up that word? Yeah. It helps us to mature. It helps us. It's a working understanding of how love is supposed to be and how relationships are supposed to work. My marriage helps me become more like Jesus, and it also gives me a demonstration of who Jesus is. Chris she's flesh and blood, a picture of how Christ loves me. And I appreciate that about her. So it matures me. It prepares me. It gives me a working definition for what it's supposed to look like, right? The way that Jesus loves me is the way that my wife loves me and the way that I love her. And we use him as the definition of that.
Yeah.
So
I
good.
just would maybe close by saying, just encouraging people that, we serve a big God. And sometimes we forget that he's a God of the impossible. When there is no other way, God always makes a way. And I just think that we need to never forget that. And I think, what you see here today, we're all nice and hair's done and stuff, but marriage is a working daily thing. And I think you need to realize that change happens daily, not in a day.
Not in a day. Yep.
And that's something that we live by, God can miraculously change anything at any point, but through that process is how we grow and how we learn. And so I just want to encourage people, if people are down or they're in a certain place in their life or their marriage, that we serve a big God. And the Bible says, ask anything in my name and I'm going to give it to you. And that's what I would say.
Pastor John and Chris, thank you so much for being with us
Thank you.
today. I know, Pastor John, you mentioned that we don't live in a marriage-friendly community right now, but it can be one of the greatest witnesses that we have on the earth right now. And I would just say to any of our listeners that are out there today, maybe you're going through a struggle or you need help in any way in your marriage. I want you to know that there is resources available to you guys. I would find your local church with a good Bible-based, God-believing community that you can gather around, where there's counsel, where there's people who can support and uplift you. I think God created marriage to succeed, and we believe that God's got the best in store for you guys. So thank you so much.
Yes.
We appreciate it. Thank you so much for listening into episode 2 of Beyond Sunday. We hope you enjoyed the podcast. We look forward to you guys tuning in again real soon. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for joining us on the Beyond Sunday podcast by the Springs Church. This podcast is available to watch on YouTube and Facebook. You can listen along on Apple, Android, or Spotify. If you enjoy this podcast, please be sure to share it with your family and friends. Our next episode will be with our very own pastors, Pastor John and Chris Jubilee.